Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Hesed Sabbath Fellowship. We meet every Sabbath at 1631 Ford Parkway, St. Paul, Minnesota, from 11:30 a.m. to sunset. We'd love to see you sometime. Hey, I get questions every now and then, and I just received a question from Lawrence, one of our viewers, and he said, Joel, if I may go off topic, it has bothered me for so many, many years. I tell people I can't believe all the pain and suffering and evil and death came from Adam and Eve eating a piece of fruit. Something else was going on there. I would love very much insight into this tape or video or something I can read or your opinion on it. God bless. Nice question. Paul said Adam was not deceived. Now, he answered this to somebody else. So I totally agree with Lawrence. Adam was not deceived. Eve was deceived, and Scripture points that out. Adam joined her because he loved her, just like Yeshua loves us. And so he chose to suffer and die because he loved us. Well, Adam suffered and died 930 years later because he loved his wife. So rebellion, there's rebellions, and we'll find three rebellions, I think. But the main thing is I can find something eschatological about this, and I'm not a theologian. Okay, why am I not a theologian? Because then you're just remembering information to regurgitate it to people. And that doesn't interest me. Jesus lived, he died, he resurrected, he's coming back again. And so that's eschatology, and that's exciting. It's a purpose for learning all this information and studying as much as I do. So I like the fact that he's coming back. And Lawrence, thank you for the question. So I'm not going to blame what's going on with the plague with rats, maybe, bats, snakes, or whatever they're eating. I'm blaming it on CRISPR. Wuhan is a CRISPR location. That means that they are doing genome editing at this location. And this is proof right here. This is a picture of a woman in Wuhan doing CRISPR work, and also the novel virus, the coronavirus, it's got the markers of CRISPR. It's too perfectly shaped. And so, but I'm not going to be talking much about that. I'm going to be talking about this rat situation. Rats are plagues. Rats, I'm going to be talking about answering his question. So, but I want to state real quick, if it's seal 4, then you would expect 1.8 billion deaths in 2020. Right now, 50 million are quarantined, and it seems like it's expanding very, very quickly. So this one scientist said months ago that this would kill 65 million people 3 months before the outbreak of this Wuhan, China virus. So the CDC would like to go to China. They're going there right now. But China is not open to investigating this. So what I want to talk about now is about the zodiac signs, the 12 signs of China, and this is the first one. And it relates to the 10 plagues in Egypt. Water to blood, frogs, lice, flies. Okay, so rats and ox and tigers and rabbits and dragons, and they're gods, okay? These are the gods, and it starts with the rat. So, and rats, in cases of plague since the late 1800s, including an outbreak in Madagascar in 2017, rats and other rodents help spread the disease. If Y. pestis infects rats, the bacterium can pass into the fleas that drink the rodent's blood. When a plague-stricken rat dies, its parasites abandon the corpse and may go to bite humans. That's from Nat Geo. So just keep in mind there are similarities, and you'll see this throughout this video that I'm coming against, and God ultimately in the end is coming against these plagues, but the people behind the plagues are the fallen entities behind the plagues that set up this horoscope and these zodiac signs. So what I'm trying to do is compare and contrast between the Exodus and what you saw there and the plagues. So let's just run through a few of these things here real quick. Each one of these plagues seems to be coming against the gods of Egypt. So, the first couple here were duplicated by the Egyptians, and then they weren't after lice. But the plagues are similar. So once again, just look at the zodiac signs and then look at the plagues and realize that they're somewhat similar. And then also be aware of the time frames that were involved down below there. And so the main thing is Moses is coming against Pharaoh. God versus God, and we'll show that. And I'm linking between the gods of Egypt and the gods of China in the zodiac signs. And then I'm also linking Rome in there too, and other places. I mean, we have the Nordic gods, we have the Greek gods, we have the Rome's gods. But it's interesting that it's 12 here. So it's Jupiter, and I'm not going to name them all. You know who the gods are, and you can read it. But it seems as though they were around during the time from Adam to Noah. And so these are the heroes of renown from Genesis 6:4. So just keep that in mind. This is the problem going on. Gods and the fall. Now, we're going to come to Mike Heiser, and he's got opinions on this. He's not really going to blame Adam. That's not his worldview. He is citing more Jewish tradition, which is what I would be citing. He's citing three rebellions, and so he's citing what happened when Satan fell. That he's not going to cite that it's Adam and Eve sinning. He doesn't want to blame Adam. He really wants to find why the world is screwed up and what's this other story. So he's citing some interesting passages: Psalm 82, Deuteronomy 32, Genesis 6, 1 through 5, Genesis 3. And so he's really citing Jewish traditions. He is. And then he's also linking demons to drugs. So this video is interesting. So just go to the Remnant Radio on YouTube, Demons and Evil Spirits. I'll put it down below too, so you can click the link. The main thing is, this is interesting because it's his worldview, and it's pretty good, guys. I'll take it a little bit further, but it's a good worldview, and it's a good thing for you to watch. It's an hour and a half. Heiser has some conflicts with standard churchianity. He gets along better at UFO conferences than in the church because he thinks different than them. He went on something called Pagan Radio, and he did very well with them because he's willing to think outside of the box, which is what I do too. And so he believes in the supernatural. He really, really does. Now, I've experienced it, so I don't just believe in it. I've experienced it, so I know what's going on. Here's the three rebellions he's going to cite. Genesis 3, the angels fell. Genesis 6, 1 through 4, the angels mixed seed. Genesis 11, 1 through 9, that is Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. And then Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9, it's talking about corruption and God dispersing the 70 nations out amongst the sons of Israel, or the sons of God. So really, it's very interesting. These are more notes about it. I like where Heiser is going with this. So now we're going to go into the scripture, and I'll give you what I think about it. I'm going to try hard not to twist the Bible. I'm going to give you prophecy as I believe that it should be taken. There are different layers of prophecy, and then the news as it pertains. So here's how I started out. God in Genesis 1:1 set up something called Badil and Bayin. Okay, so you can see it up there. Well, it's hard for you to see it, the first line. Each one of these are little cutouts from Genesis 1, where he divided between, divided between, divided between, Badil or Badal or Badel in that case, and then Bayin. So, between the light and the darkness, between the waters. He divided between the waters that were under and over, between the lights and the firmament, and divided between the day, divided between the light and between the darkness. So he divided things and he stated them in his own way. The main thing is that then at that point in time, something happened. And I don't know when it happened exactly, but he was divided. I'm arguing that he's also dividing between angels and mankind, which will be created in a short period of time. So it seems like the angels were there sooner than mankind. Now, they're in Jewish lore. They argue that the angels looked down upon us as Adam and Eve were being created, and they were not happy. They were not pleased, at least a third of them, because they felt like, why would God need to create mankind? Why would He give them this experience of living? And they have free will, the angelic hosts do. That's why 1/3 fell. But mankind, they were so simplistic, so wonderful, and the angels really couldn't stand it. And also, they found, I would compare it to the Matrix, when one of the machines kind of walks up and grabs on Lawrence Fishburne's face and kind of just smears away at it, and he's so contemptuous. So keep in mind, as computers get better, as angels have so many more powers than we do, they look at us with contempt. The 1/3 that fell. not the godly angels. They realize that they have a purpose to message us when needed. But I believe that God divided between this and that, and then also he divided between angels and mankind. Obviously, he wants them to stay separate. So I can't say when he did it or when they fell, but I can say that he did divide them. Okay, so let's continue on. Satan fell at some point in time. These are some of the verses that correspond to that. Your heart was proud because of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit in the mount of the assembly in the heights of Zaphon, which is the north. That seems like where Satan would attack from the north, the dark side. I would ascend to the tops of the clouds. I would make myself like the Most High. So, according to this theologian, he fell based on pride and selfishness. I don't know when, but those seem to be two good reasons for why he fell. So let's continue on. Now we're going to move on to the Adam and Eve story and kind of look through it a little bit. So God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. So Adam was formed outside and was placed into this garden, and the Lord commanded that he could eat from any tree other than the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You could not eat of that. And he gave specific orders to Adam, not to Eve. So it looks like the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise. She took its fruit and ate, and she also gave to her husband who was with her, and he ate. She was deceived. He wasn't. Eve took of the fruit and ate it. Eve did not think she was going to that she was going against what God had said, and it says also in 1 Timothy 2:14, Adam was not deceived. So we know the theology behind this. He divided things, he kept things separate. Then, unfortunately, Eve and Adam ate from the fruit, but that's not the cause of all the horrors that we see in the world today. It is really the fall. So there are people out there that would say, oh no, everything's cursed, cursed, cursed. And cursed is the ground, and cursed are the thorns and thistles, and all the plants that you must cultivate. And cursed is the ground because of you, and in toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. Mm, I think that's, if you think that's it, that we need to attribute everything to Adam and Eve, and that's the original sin, I think you're missing the point. And Eve here says, the serpent deceived me and I ate. Okay, fine. So now we're going to go down the two schools. Now we're going down theology. So Augustine started it out, and it merged into Calvinism over time. So Augustine said, grant what you command and command what you grant. And so, unfortunately, Augustine is the original sin guy. Because of their sin, Adam and Eve became less real and had less being and less goodness. Augustine believed human nature was transmitted in the sexual act. Okay, Augustine had a lot of sex, and then he came to the Lord, and then he stopped having sex. So, unfortunately for Augustine, he had this corrupt idea of what sex was. It's either wild, crazy sex or lack of sex. And so he blamed too much on sex and sin, and he linked them together. Sex is not sinful. God loves sex. In a committed married relationship, God loves sex because it makes babies. He doesn't like you wasting your seed. He wants you to procreate and love those children and love Him and be in covenant with Him first and then in covenant with your family. So I think this is just a wrongful look at sex and a wrongful look at sin, and sex is not related to sin unless you're outside of the good covenant of marriage. And so they're going to say baptism removes the guilt of original sin, but not the corruption of the human moral nature. So, we're just totally depraved. Okay, fine. Pelagius was on the other side, and Pelagius was a scholar. He said there's no original sin. There's a moral responsibility, which implies a moral ability. Grace is helpful, but not necessary for a man to do God's will and to be right with God. Man has inherent power to believe and keep God's law. Pelagianism was condemned, and so he was condemned to die because it's always this case. The guys with the power kill off the nice guys with free will, and so here's the strange fire guys up there, and I don't get along with them at all. They're hardened. Um, So, intriguing down on the lower right-hand side, this guy happens to say that John MacArthur Jr. is a 5-point Calvinist and a grace changer. This has a double message about the believer's security. He believes in eternal security, which is totally wrong and anti-Bible. But he is very popular, and his doctrines are flawed. So be very careful of John MacArthur. So, as in the case of um, John Calvin, who is John MacArthur's hero, he found out about Michael Servetus, and he lusted for the blood of killing Michael Servetus, which is a lot like Pelagianism. They killed him off, and they killed off Michael Servetus. So anybody that preaches free will or anything different than standard Augustinian theology or Calvinist theology, which is total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and then once saved, always saved is the bottom one. All 5 points of the tulip. Anybody that preaches against that is a heretic and needs to be burned at the stake. But the problem is it corrupts the thinking of us. It's not a correct worldview. It denies the supernatural. It denies logic in most cases. We are not all totally depraved, and I'll give you what I believe. We are not unconditionally elected, which means that God has to choose you. Well, the problem is, and he only chooses Calvinists or Augustinians. So just keep this in mind. And Calvin and MacArthur are right in a few areas. There are some strange people selling anointing and selling problems, but the problem is they look at the history of the church and they see where the gifts are not part of ancient Orthodox traditions, not in the early church, not in the medieval church, not in the Reformation church, not in the Great Awakening. And so I think John MacArthur has appointed himself to be judge, and he's judging God. And I really don't like that at all. And so there are times when charisma is chaotic, but there are times when it's really, really good. And so you have to just walk the fine line between the two, the crazy side of the non charismatics and the crazy side of the crazy charismatics. Try to walk in normalcy. This is my opinion on this, that there were 5 angels to start out with, covering cherubim in the Hebrew. They would be 5 because there were 5. Satan was a covering one in the face of our Father. And then in Ezekiel, you can see on the right-hand side, there are only 4. So then in the middle there, you can see how I show the inverted pentagram, how when Satan fell, think of it as if he just kind of twisted it and sent it down, and that's his symbol. So I'm intrigued by the fact that I think the Masons on the left-hand side here used Hebrew in there and other things like that. Otherwise, I don't know much about this because I really don't study the pagan hardly at all. I just wanted to point out that it was 5, and now it's 4 cherubim. And so that's where the 5s kind of come from, with the point going up and the point going down. Um, what's Jewish and what's typically Arminianism, and what is my worldview is you have 2 different beings on your shoulders, the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer HaRa. Tov is good, Ra is bad. Good inclination, evil inclination. We should do good. So basically, my worldview is I have the Bible and I have this inclination to do good. So I should do those. I have a reason to do it, and I have someone kind of chiding me on to do good. And so if I believed in original sin and all the curses and things like that, then I would have an excuse, and I really don't. All I have to do is pray and believe and remember that I can do the right thing and read the Bible. So that's why this is very Jewish, but it's also Arminian too. So it's but not as popular. It doesn't sell as easily because it's just so much easier to be able to blame it on original sin. Well, Adam sinned, Eve sinned, and so therefore I can just blame it on them. So once again, is your Yetzer Hara really evil? It is. We're not as evil as you think. We're not totally depraved, okay? And stop thinking that way because it is really pathetic and it will drive you bonkers. It's better for you to think that you were made by God in His image. You can cooperate with him. You can work with him. He's omnipotent, sovereign. He's personal. He's all good, and we can follow him. And we have free will to choose to do the right thing, especially as things get rough in the world. So then, where did the rebellion come from? Satan. It looks like the angels, and this is Enoch here. And it came to pass when the had multiplied, when the children of men had multiplied in those days, and were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and they said to one another, Come, let us choose wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And one of these guys, who was their leader, said to them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Oh, let us all swear an oath. And they all bind themselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. They swear, they all together, and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were all 200. And they descended in the days of Yared on the summit of Mount Hermon. Okay, so that is the first fall. And so the second rebellion seems to be this. So, and it came to pass when began men to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, and they saw the sons of God, the daughters of men, that were beautiful, and they took themselves wives of all whomever they chose, and said, God not shall strive my spirit with man anymore. So this is Genesis 1 and 2, and we'll continue on with Genesis 6, 1 and 2, Genesis 6, 3 and 4. And so forever indeed he is flesh, man is flesh, and shall be his days 120 years. Then the Nephilim, this is verse 4, the big verse, the Nephilim, the fallen ones, on the earth in those days, and also after that, when came in the sons of God to the daughters of men. So there it is, B'nai Ha-Elohim, El Benot Ha-Adam. So there's no other way to spin it. You can't say the sons of Seth. And that's a weird worldview anyway. It's better to just go with what the text says. And they bore children to them, and those were the mighty men who, okay, so we're mixing here. And that's the second problem. We're mixing the seed between man and angel, and that's not supposed to occur. So it basically, then you have to eradicate, and this is coming from Heiser here. So Heiser says, eradicate the hostile seed that arose because of the rebellion of the sons of God, which stand against the kingdom of restoration, restrain the spread of evil, catalyzed by the event, Jewish theology of human depravity, which is always free will, always free will. And so we are not that depraved. I mean, we're in a sinful world, but we don't have to sin. We have the Torah, the law, the Bible, and we have God's Spirit, and we have this inclination to do good. So, and Heiser came through with those points. So, continuing on, finishing out Genesis 6, 5 through 6, and saw God that great was the wickedness of man in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart and altogether evil all the time. And he was sorry, God, that he had made man on the earth, and was grieved in his heart. And so he said, God, I will destroy man whom I have created from off the face of the earth. So it's just interesting how that moves along, that second rebellion. Now, I want to give you some other problematic verses, and I'm going to do this intermittently as we go along. So this is from Exodus 7:1. So we have this clash of Moses versus Pharaoh. And so as you read along, so said God to Moses, see, I have made you Elohim to Pharaoh, and Aaron, your brother, will be a Navi, a prophet. Very interesting. So in this case, God is literally saying, I'm going to elevate you to the status of Elohim. Now, it's probably not a capital E, but still it's very, very intriguing, which leads me to believe that God can do this with other people like that. And so he's operating in God's stead as an Elohim. And so it's problematic, guys, because that's a step up. But Yeshua handles it, so we'll get to that in just a little bit here. Now, this is another Heiserism. This is the third rebellion, we'll call it, that leads to, not causes divine corruption. And so human rebellion isn't a divine corruption. It just isn't. This is from Deuteronomy 32:8 through 9. And God divided the inheritance of the Most High, the nations. He separated the sons of Adam. He set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. So B'nai Israel, but it's of God, for portion of God, his people, Yaakov, the place of inheritance. And Heiser is saying of God, and other people do too, because if you check out the Dead Sea Scrolls, it does say of God, but of Israel, of God. Okay, so Heiser's comments then are he will bless the nations that were disinherited. So God disperses them in Genesis 11, but also talks about it in 32, 8, and 9. But he's going to disinherit them, yes, at that point in time, but then bring them back together again in the end. And claim human council members, believers from among the disinherited nations, reclaim those nations under the authority of the new sons of God, the believers, destroy the gods of the nations. So that's what we're coming against. China with their rat year and other things like that. We're coming against the gods of Rome, coming against the gods of whatever. These beings seem to have existed at some point in time. And what we're doing in this video is coming against that worldview and also against those beings. Moving forward, this one's always been very, very interesting to me, and how this is Isaiah 24, 20 through 21, and it has something in it called the Bayom Hahu, which is in that day, which is literally the time when Yeshua returns. And so the earth shall, like a drunkard, shall totter like a hut, and shall be heavy upon it. The transgression, that's Pesha, that's a rebellious transgression. And there's no sin sacrifice for that. And then will fall, Nafal, interesting, and not again rise, Kuma, Kum. And then shall come to pass, Bayom Hahu, I will punish, and that's like an accounting type of a punishment, God on the host. So, I mean, what do you do with this? It's the host of the Hamarom, Bamarom. So, the ones in this Merom area, on high, Merom, and the kings, that's Melech, of the earth, or Melchi, but yeah, the kings, plural, of the earth, on the earth. So what he's doing with this problematic set of verses is he's describing the judgment in the end days of those that are the hosts, the Zava, that are in this area above your heads, probably about Mount Hermon height, where the fallen angels would be, up to the moon. And if I gave you Obadiah's verses oh, I'm blanking on the other one, you would be able to say, yep, that's exactly where the Merom is. So this entity, this part of heaven, and I listed it down below, there are different levels of heaven. According to Judaism, there's 7. According to Paul, there are 3 levels. But so there is this Merom area, and God has to punish the host in that area, but then also has to punish the kings of the earth that come against Israel. So just be aware of that. It's very interesting how this works out. And this is problematic because obviously the fall is accounted in these types of verses, that he has to punish the host on heaven, in the Merom, and also the kings on the earth. And he does list off who he's going to punish first, the host of the Hamerom. Okay. Then the next one is Psalm 82. And Yeshua cites this. This is a psalm by Asaph. Elohim takes a stand in the congregation of the divine among the gods. He judges. So what's up with that? Well, it sounds like he's going to judge these formerly powerful creatures, the watchers, we'll call them, the fallen angels, and until when he will judge unjustly, and the wicked show partiality, Selah, defend the poor, the fatherless. Yeah, so basically he's going to judge these wicked ones that fell a long, long time ago. And then Yeshua cites this also. So I have said, you people are Elohim. If he called Elohim the people to whom the word Elohim was addressed, and the Tanakh cannot be broken, then are you telling the one whom the Father set apart as holy and sent into the world, you are committing blasphemy, just as I said? I am a son of Elohim. So Yeshua cites that. And so in this case, in 82 verse 6, I said, gods, you are, and children of the Most High. Elohim, Elion. Interesting. Very problematic in the Calvinist, Augustinian worldview. but it makes sense in the supernatural worldview. It's like, okay, sure, yeah, these guys are out there. There are these fallen angels, and they're technically like gods. Okay. And Daniel 10, you have to deal with the worldview there. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia, well, who's that? And he withheld Gabriel, but then Michael shows up and saves him. And Michael's the chief of the princes. So we have the fallen angels that are Zava, and then we have Michael and Gabriel and other angels that fight against them. So this is a logical supernatural worldview. That we've got the fight going on here. Then we move forward into Isaiah 26. I wanted to show you 24 first, with the Marome area that seems to be an interesting point above the earth. But now, this is getting into another judgment time frame. And keep in mind, Isaiah 24 through 27 is really like Revelation for the Old Testament. And so, and the earth, the dead shall be cast out. And the dead there, do you see that on the top? It says Raphaim. Okay, that's like saying Nephilim, Raphaim, Zenzumim, all of these creatures that were giants during the Old Testament times. So, and then we move into the important section that we learn from. Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself for a little while, just a moment, until it is past the indignation. For behold, God comes out of his place to Pekad. There you go, account. For Avon, that's a sin that is a willful sin, and there's no sacrifice for that. Yeshev, the inhabitants of the earth, and we'll disclose those things. So, bottom line is that as you move through the Bible, this makes more sense that the Raphaim are going to be punished, and these other either fallen angels or giants or whatever you want to call them, they're going to be punished at some point in time. Otherwise, it's just ridiculous, because if you're looking at original sin, this doesn't factor well into that. So it's one worldview or the other, people. You're either going to go with the supernatural worldview, and as things go more supernatural in the future here, it's going to be very difficult to defend that. Revelation 20. We might as well go right there. And now it's Greek, so let me read left to right. And the devil, the one deceiving them, was cast into the lake of fire and sulfur, where also the beast, Therion, we've talked about that before, and the false prophet. In this case, it is prophet, pseudo-prophetes. Interesting how the Greek spells it out so well. And they will be tormented day and night to the ages of the ages. So the supernatural worldview, it works all the way through the Bible, and it works with what you see going on in the world today. Revelation 20, let's continue on. According to the works of them, and death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. This is the death, second, Deuteros death, and is the lake of fire. And if anyone was found in the book, not in the book of life, having been written, he was cast into the lake of fire. So you want to be written into the book of life. So just keep it in mind. He has a supernatural punishment, and then humanity, if they want to, they can be cast into the lake of fire if they choose so. But you have to be chosen, rather. You have to choose to be stricken out of the book of life. You start out as a child because you can't determine right from wrong. But once you get to the age of accountability, you can get yourself written out of the book of life, and take some effort, but you can do it. This is my view, my worldview, written out kind of in a picture. So I'm just going to describe it to you, and it should match up with some of the things. Then we'll go through a couple of more problematic verses. So I believe the Father, Son, Spirit are all one. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. That's Hebrew for just saying God has stated all the way through, and Jesus said it too in John 17. They are one. They are one. They were one, and you can't divide God the Father from the Spirit anyway. They're all Echad. Okay. On the left-hand side, you have the angels, the Malachim. There's 2/3 of them that are good, and then the fallen angels on the right-hand side. There's 1/3 of them. And then they mixed, and you can see that little tiny line there, with earthly women. They weren't supposed to do so. There's not supposed to be the intermixing, so you can see that line between the two of them. And then that produced the Nephilim, the hybrids, and then they died, and after the flood, they became demons. there is no resurrection for them whatsoever. There's really no plan of salvation. And that's why we're going to deal with some of the verses coming up. Um, on the other side, humankind that didn't mix with the angels, they die, they sleep, and then there's the resurrection, and eventually they're more like the angels and live with Yeshua in the end times. So it's a supernatural situation there. So this seems to play it through in terms of a good worldview and gives you a picture. So if you want to save this concept in your mind, it helps you to understand how the mixtures aren't supposed to occur and staying separate is important. And then we die and we get resurrected because we stayed separate. Okay, here's some more problematic verses. So let's go into 1 Peter 3. For the Messiah himself died for sins once and for all, a righteous person on the behalf of unrighteous people, so that he might bring you to God. He was put to death of the flesh, but brought to life by the Spirit. And in this form, he went and made a proclamation to the imprisoned spirits. Yeah, that's the worldview that I want you to see. To those who were disobedient long ago in the days of Noah, when God waited patiently during the building of the ark, in which a few people, to be specific, 8 were delivered by means of water. Continuing on with problematic verses, Colossians 2, God made you alive along with the Messiah by forgiving you all by your sins. He wiped away the bill of charges against us because of the regulations. It stood as a testimony against us, but he removed it by nailing it to the execution stake, stripping the evil angelic rulers. I added that. And authorities, that is, I'm sorry, this is Stern. David Stern added this, stripping the evil angelic rulers and authorities, that is, the ones still at large, of their power. He made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by means of the stake. So I love the way Stern added that in his version here. That you have to have the right worldview to understand what's going on here. So there are angelic rulers that are evil and authorities, that could be kings too. It depends upon how you want to parse that out. But otherwise, that's a problematic verse. Here's 2 Peter 2. For God did not spare the angels who sinned. On the contrary, he put them in gloomy dungeons, lower than Sheol, very low, and that would be Tartarus, to be held for judgment. And he did not spare the ancient world. On the contrary, he preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, and 7 others, and brought the flood upon the world of ungodly people. And he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, reducing them to ashes and ruin, as a warning to those in the future who would live ungodly lives. But he rescued Lot, a righteous man, who was distressed by the debauchery of those unprincipled people, for the wicked deeds which the righteous man saw and heard as he lived among them tormented his righteous heart day after day. So the Lord knows how to rescue the ungodly from trials, and how, see, not original sin, this is a choice, that we can be rescued from these trials, but he will hold the wicked until the day of judgment, while continuing to punish them, especially those who follow their old natures in lust for filth, who despise authority. Continuing on, we're going to move to Enoch now. So those were biblical verses, but I want to give you some Enoch just so you can see. So called me Enoch the scribe and said to me, Enoch, thou scribe of righteousness, go, declare the watchers of the heaven who have left the high heaven, the holy eternal place, and have defiled themselves with women. They've mixed, and have done as children of the earth do, and have taken themselves wives. Ye have wrought great destruction on the earth, and ye have no peace or forgiveness of sin. See, they don't have a resurrection plan. There's just nothing there. And as much as they delight themselves in their children, the murder of their beloved ones shall they see, and over the destruction of their children shall they lament, and shall make supplication unto eternity, but mercy and peace shall not attain. And Enoch went and said, Azazel, thou shalt, and that's from the Yom Kippur day, the holiest day of the year in Judaism and in God, thou shalt have no peace. A severe sentence has gone forth against thee to put thee in bonds, and thou shalt not have toleration nor request granted thee because of the unrighteousness which thou hast taught, and because of all the works of godlessness, and unrighteousness and sin which thou hast shown men. Then I went and spoke to them all together, and they were all afraid, and fear and trembling seized them, and they besought me to draw up a petition for them. Well, they want a resurrection. They want to be forgiven. Humankind can be forgiven. These guys can't. That they might find forgiveness and read the petition in the presence of God. Continuing on to 1 Enoch 10, and he said to him, Go to Noah and tell him, hide thyself, and reveal to him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed, and the deluge is about to come upon the whole earth, and will destroy all that is in it. And now instruct him, that he may escape, and his seed may be preserved, for all the generations of the world. And the Lord spoke to Raphael, Bind Azazel hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, and make him an opening in the desert, which is due to El, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face, that he may not see light. And in the day of great judgment he shall be cast into the fire, and heal the earth which the angels have corrupted. So not original sin, this is angelic falling, and proclaim the healing of the earth, and that they may heal the plague, and that the children of men may not perish through the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. And to Gabriel said to the Lord, Proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication, and destroy the children of fornication, and the children of the watchers from amongst men, and cause them to go forth, and send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other. A couple more problematic verses. I wanted to add this out just because they're very similar to Enoch. They really, really are. So it's like the same thing as Enoch. It really is. And the angels that did not keep within their original authority, but abandoned their proper sphere, he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for the judgment of the great day. Doesn't it sound the same? That's Jude. And Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, following the pattern, like theirs, committing sexual sins and perversions, lie exposed as a warning of the everlasting fire awaiting those who must undergo punishment. The person who keeps on sinning is from the adversary, because from the very beginning the adversary has kept on sinning. It was for this reason, that very reason, that the Son of God appeared, to destroy these doings of the adversary. No one who has God as his Father keeps on sinning, because the seed planted by God remains in him. That is, he cannot continue sinning because he has God as his Father. I won't spend much time on the seals or anything like that. I just want to discuss at the end as we finish this out. I'm sorry it's such a long video, but I want you to see the worldview. I want you to see that there's a supernatural worldview. As we get into these crazy, bizarre end times, it will make more sense if you understand that God planned it to be a supernatural worldview, and that we should participate. We have spiritual gifts. We should be able to work within those gifts, the ones that are given to us, and ask for those gifts. So you should be able to fight off these inclinations. Don't blame, like the devil made me do it. Well, that's not the case. You have the inclination to do good. You have God's word, you have prayer, you have supplication, you have so many positives. Think about those and don't blame this original sin on Adam and Eve. Thank you. Good night. Be blessed.